One of the challenges in any growing movement, such as nomadism, such as nomad capitalism, for people who are getting in and who aren't exactly sure where to start, is I think that we are tempted to follow other people who may be proclaiming certain countries as the place to be. And that's fine. We've promoted a number of countries in particular here at Nomad Capitalist over the years, not as panaceas, but as things to and places to look at for particular flags on your map. But today, I'm going to share with you 5 different countries that I believe have gotten a little bit too much attention relative to the value that they offer, where the juice may not quite be worth the squeeze. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson here at Nomad Capitalist. Myself, my team, and our network help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs legally go where they're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And today I'm going to share 5 countries that I believe are a little bit overrated. Now, to be clear, that does not mean that I think these countries are bad. It does not mean that I think these countries cannot serve a purpose. It does not mean that I'm angry at you if you happen to disagree with me on one of these countries that you've chosen to live in or incorporate in or anything like that. We're not talking about countries that I think are overrated, such as the United States or many other Western countries, the so-called brand name countries, which I think do get a lot of attention. We're talking in the sphere of the nomad capitalist world, people who are going overseas. They want alternative places to incorporate their business for lower taxes. They want places to live that offer better value than London or Sydney or New York. And so these are 5 countries that, from my experience, I think don't quite measure up simply because they've gotten a lot of attention. And so we'll start with an easy target of ours here at Nomad Capitalist, and that is Spain. Every once in a while, someone comes to me and says, you know, Andrew, I love what you talk about. I want to go overseas. I want to lower my taxes. I'm tired of living in the US, for example. But my wife or my children or my mother-in-law or whomever, they'll only go if we go to Spain because they know Spain. Now, I think a lot of people have used Spain as a brand name, but it gets sucked into the nomad capitalist sphere because Spain has a golden visa. They have a temporary tax exemption for new residents, which is terrible, by the way. It's not like a zero tax exemption. It's just a minor reduction. It comes with a lot of potential challenges, in my opinion. But Spain gets a lot of attention. And so I think there's a certain romance around Spain where tourism meets nomadism, and people bring their touristic instincts in with them. It's a very common thing, and I'm not trying to blame anyone. When I first met Mrs. H, she wanted to go to Paris, and so I said, all right, we'll go to Paris, we'll go for your birthday. And when I asked, where do you want to go next time, she rattled off some places, and I said, we're going to work on it. We're going to get into some really great places that are off the beaten track. And now she happens to love the places that are off the beaten track. We're not going to Rome or Athens or Barcelona or these places. And we have a great time going to lesser known places. And I think Spain gets so hyped by people in the nomad community. I also think a lot of people look at it and they say, well, as long as I'm spending fewer than 183 days in Spain, I can avoid the crazy income tax. I can avoid the wealth tax. Not so fast. Spain, as with many European countries, has a number of provisions where you may be sucked in as a tax resident, even spending less time, particularly if you own a home or you have other connections there. So difficult from a tax perspective. We've talked about how they're outright coming and confiscating property in some part of the country. I think just overrated. Even the Golden Visa program, not a great one for citizenship, not an efficient place to get citizenship. Certainly there are opportunities for some people there, but in my opinion, way overrated. Now, the second country that's also in Europe that I think some folks might disagree on, and if you disagree, leave a comment below. If you agree, leave a comment below. I want to hear from you. I believe that Estonia has been somewhat overrated, not because I don't love what they've done in digitalizing their government, making everything flat and easy and efficient. I love that. But it's gotten so much publicity, and it's become a place where, for example, people go and incorporate their companies just because, in my opinion, some of those people are kind of hopping on the bandwagon. And so they go to Estonia, they incorporate a company through some sleek, sexy kind of SaaS, or online service provider that makes it easy. And no doubt there are companies that have made it easier to set up a company in Estonia than perhaps in the UAE, for example, or in other tax-friendly jurisdictions. But Estonia is not the most tax-friendly jurisdiction. It's not the most regulation-friendly jurisdiction. It may work for some people, but I think that their introduction of e-residence, which has been called a residence permit, it's been called e-citizenship, it's none of those things. It's basically just a way to track you online, that you can open up a company, you can deal with the government. But so what? You can't even really open a bank account anymore, right? And so what could have been a great country to deal with, particularly in 2020 with all the lack of travel. I think even long before 2020 just wasn't working quite as well as planned. I mean, Estonia had a similar issue in one regard to what Hong Kong has had, where, reasonable place to set up a company, not that reasonable by and large to set up bank accounts. We certainly have a couple banks that we work with from time to time, but the banks in Estonia proved to be more difficult than the government, which made it difficult. The e-residence was overhyped, and nothing wrong with Estonia. I think that, however, it's gotten a bit of this brand name in the nomad circle that I would potentially avoid. Another country that's been talked about, particularly for Americans and Canadians to move to, is Chile. And Chile suffers from what I've prognosticated before. It could be what I call the visa waiver program effect, where the moment a country gets visa-free travel to the United States, they jump the shark in a way. I have not done an extensive study on this, but as I look at all the countries that get this visa-free travel to the U.S., it seems that they have a certain number of regulations which get in the way of freedom, which is what allows them to have the visa-free travel in the first place. They become wealthy enough where they start having to find new problems, like how do we tax people more. Chile hasn't gone down all the wrong roads, but I do feel like it hasn't done all of the right things. And I feel like it's been a place that's been so widely talked about for people who perhaps want a soft landing into Latin America or out of the U.S., out of Canada. And nothing wrong with that. Again, I'm saying I particularly find it to be a bit overhyped. You go and walk around Santiago, and I know many people will say, well, that's not where you want to spend your time. You want to be on the beach, etc. The last time I was in Chile, I wanted to go back to the beach, and we couldn't because there were protests that were blocking the highway, and people were firing tear gas into where we were walking by. So, even though it has the boringness of a Toronto or a Vancouver to me, it has that higher cost. For me, it's not the soft landing that you'd want, and it's so far away. And they've done some great things. They've done Startup Chile that encouraged entrepreneurs to come. They've done a lot of things to get their name out there, and I have a great respect for that. But I think that now, as some of that publicity starts to fade away, I think it's a little bit less interesting to me. Not saying it's off. I do occasionally talk to people about Chile, but I think if you're going there solely because you want to follow other people, that's probably not going to work as well as you might think. Now, another country we've talked about, which I know a lot of people will disagree with me with, and I want to hear you in the comments, is I feel that Thailand has become overrated. Now, when I talk to people who have $100 million, they're often not talking much about Thailand. In fact, I'm often suggesting, hey, you're looking for some back pocket residence permits. Here's one in Thailand, put some money in the bank, keep an option open in Southeast Asia, pretty low cost, no muss, no fuss. Certainly, a lot of people who are younger, who are starting out, have gone to Thailand. And I've been saying for years, I think that Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Penang, all kinds of places around Malaysia offer a bit higher level of sophistication, potentially, I think in the cities, lower cost of living, a lot of things that people just don't talk that much about Malaysia. I think a lot of people wouldn't be talking about Malaysia if we hadn't started talking about it many, many years ago. And so for me, Bangkok, I'm friends with Reed at Investation. He lives in Bangkok. He loves it. We disagree on that. That's okay. It feels overcrowded to me. I like big cities, less so perhaps as I get older, but it just feels like a little bit too much to me. The residence permits, not a bad option, but right now in 2020, the government has been so particular about who gets back in. So have a lot of countries, but I think Thailand has led the way, and it's been frustrating. And so, for me, lots of people talking about it, lots of talk out there, and I fear that some people choose it just because they follow that. And so it's become certainly a brand name in the nomad world. And I think, again, some people who are just getting started go and do things that, from a tax perspective, helping someone right now get out of a $100,000 tax bill because people think that Thailand is so easy. There are no rules, and in reality, there are rules when it comes to tax. There are rules when it comes to immigration. They become more difficult in recent years, and I think the hype sometimes slows people down in realizing that. The last country, the fifth country that I believe has been overhyped is particularly targeted at retirees, and that is the country of Belize. Now, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you probably haven't heard a lot about Belize. You have heard me talk about for a couple of years that Belize companies have no longer been a very viable option for moving your business offshore, even though they have very few requirements. That's exactly why they've become increasingly undesirable when doing business globally. But if you are in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, perhaps you've seen content about retiring, perhaps you have been to a conference. I know we have Nomad Capitalist Live coming up in 2021. It's our first live conference in years, and I used to do live conferences with Peter Schiff and Jim Rickards and others. And I would always be talking to these guys who'd be calling me from the conference circuit. We want to come and pitch Belize. And there is so much misinformation out there, and I think so many properties. Certainly Belize, I guess, could be a good investment. To me, it's such a tiny economy. I have talked about economies like Cambodia, like Georgia, which are not particularly big economies. But for investing in real estate, I see that most of the stuff is targeted at retirees. And so, what happens if there's a problem with retirees getting their income? What happens if you have a new generation of people who don't have as much wealth and they can't retire? What's the market for that property in Belize, which I think is often overpriced? I talked to someone about a year ago out of buying a $1 million condo at a name brand hotel. I don't remember if it was on the beach or like not even on the beach, but $1 million condo in Belize, to me, was just excessive. And they had heard about it from one of these guys who goes around to conferences and promotes it. And so if you are in that 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s bracket, I have nothing wrong with Belize. But I think that the banking sector has been a little bit overhyped. It is still, I suppose, easy enough to get a bank account there, but how are you moving your money? The real estate that is often pitched to people, I think you should take a look at. And so if you're following the herd, that's what these countries are. It is, if you are following the herd. Now, if you've done your independent research, if you have talked to people who offer an unbiased opinion, I'm unbiased about any of these countries. You want to go and live in Thailand, that's fine. Spain, I'm going to talk you out of because of the tax issues largely. But I don't hate any of these countries, but I just think you need to be really careful whose advice you're following. You want to look at all the different options, and you don't want to go into one particular option simply because you are following the herd. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.